Once upon a time, there was a girl named Kristen. Every day she enjoyed practicing yoga because of how her body felt and the stillness and focus it offered her mind. One day, she decided to take a yoga teacher training in order to learn more about yoga and why she loves it so much. Because of that, yoga became more firmly imprinted in her life, and she began teaching others an alignment-based practice at several different studios. Because of that, she witnessed the positive and powerful impact a thoughtful yoga practice has on others, until finally she opened her own yoga studio. And ever since that day, Kristen has had the privilege and responsibility of sharing the joys and intricacies of yoga with all those who care to join her.
Welcome to A Life Worth Working, a podcast about how we get to the soul of work. We're your hosts, Dana Allen Walsh and Michelle Weiss. I'm a senior pastor of a progressive church, and Michelle is an education and workforce strategist. And in this episode, we chat with Kristin Olson, who is the studio owner of Home Yoga in Andover, Massachusetts, where Michelle and I both live.
Kristin has been teaching since 2007, and she's known for her ability to articulate precise alignment, which helps ground her students in the present moment. I've been lucky enough to experience her teaching, and truly, you cannot think of anything else except what she's telling you to pay attention to in every single part of your body.
Kristin leads workshops and teacher training for beginner students as well as advanced practitioners. She also leads domestic and international retreats. That's something that Michelle and I are dreaming about doing at some point.
Dana and I have made a pact that if we can somehow launch this podcast successfully, we are going on one of those international yoga retreats with Kristin.
Yes. Kristin is one of those people who had an early sense of calling. It started when she was 14 years old.
So when I was a freshman in high school, we read Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse, and they started talking about Om, and I was very intrigued by that. And I happened to be in Blockbuster, so it's a long time ago. And I saw an Ali McGraw video. So again, it's showing you how old I am. And I bought it. So it wasn't one that you could rent. I bought the video and I did it every day after school for years. And then the first time I taught a yoga class was my junior year of high school at the Powder Puff game, because we were juniors and the seniors were there. And I thought that doing sun salutations might psych out the other team. So we did that. And so yoga's been a part of my life since I was a teenager. The college I went to required gym classes, so I took yoga classes there. Then once I graduated college, that's when all of the Bikram studios started popping up. So this was all while I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. Right? So my professional life was going on. Yoga seemed to be the grounding point, my anchor that I would always come back to. I signed up for a teacher training in New York City. And then a week later, I found out I was pregnant. My husband and I moved to Andover. And then when my oldest, who's now 17, was 7 weeks, I started my teacher training. I was teaching at 4 or 5 different places, and I just wanted to consolidate. So I opened my own studio.
It's incredible, Kristin, to hear your journey and how yoga has been this clear through line the whole time. And that's such a unique pathway. We see so many other people have journeys that are all over the place. How did you know that this was not just a passion and something you love, but something you wanted to do professionally?
Well, I did struggle with that. I went to a good college, I went to grad school, and so there was always this back and forth in my mind about how could you spend this much money on your education and just be a yoga teacher? I struggled with that for a really long time. And I think that just the way my own life worked out, where I had 3 kids pretty quickly. So in my professional life, I was a journalist and I also was in PR. And we moved up to Andover at the same time that I started having kids. And it was at that turning point where I decided, do I want to go back to a typical 9-to-5 job, or do I want to pursue what I actually love? Thankfully, the way that it worked out, I was able to finally come to terms with I was just going to be a yoga teacher.
So why the just in there? What's been part of your journey that's made you feel like it's just yoga teacher?
I think that the expectation when I was growing up was that, and it's not because of my parents, it's what I put on myself, that I would be like a lawyer or something along those lines. So to have a career that I feel is a little less orthodox. The salary is, you can't look it up online and see what a yoga teacher or, at this point, a small business owner, you don't know like what they're going to make. So the trajectory or having that sense of security or stability was just never, it was up to me to create that. I think that the pressure shifted from friends and parents to my children to make sure that they understood that your career is more than how much money you make, and to have something that's fulfilling and that you feel has a purpose. That was important for me to demonstrate to my kids, that because I know when I had those 9-to-5 jobs, I was miserable. Like I couldn't stomach the fact of going and sitting at that point in a cubicle for, several hours a day, 5 days a week. So I think that being able to wake up in the morning and feel like you have that sense of purpose was more important to me than whatever the paycheck was. And I think in turn, when you do follow what you love, then, the money comes back to you.
What actually leads to the moment where you're able to kind of take a leap? Was there a particular moment or time, or was it just sort of like a confluence of different factors? I'm just curious, like, what was it that kind of led you to sort of say, I can't do this?
There wasn't a particular moment. It was just kind of a slow buildup. I was seeing the effect that teaching had on other people, and also the way it made me feel, the freedom I had in some ways to create my own schedule. All of that just seemed to speak to me. And obviously I had resources to be, if I didn't have a partner who was making money, this whole career path probably would have been different. Not to say that we didn't need me to make money, but there was a little bit of cushion there where I had some time to struggle. Yeah. I do remember, though, meditating and having a clear aha moment that I was going to open my own place. And I think that was really when I decided to take control of my own career.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
I was working teaching yoga at 4 different places. And I noticed that my teaching was different than a lot of the other teachers around. And at first that was a challenge, but my classes started to grow in numbers. So that as a teacher gives you confidence if people are coming back and then you're growing your class size, then you're, okay, I'm onto something. And so just having 3 young kids and being all over the place I sort of lost a little bit of that control. And then also just feeling like I wanted something of my own, not really to be proud of, but more so that I could be successful or prosperous for the sake of my kids. So I just decided it was time.
And so how did you think about building the culture that you did? Or did it kind of naturally evolve?
Yeah, I definitely didn't plan that. I knew I wanted to teach in the way that resonated with me. What worked for me was in some ways more cerebral, like trying to get people to understand that it's more than just the physical practice, that it's this time in their day where they are completely focused and they can let go of everything else, and that the effects of that start to bleed into their everyday life without even realizing it. So giving people that an hour in their day where they can just forget about everything else without hitting them over the head with it. There are some places where the yoga is all about the physical and you're just doing as many vinyasas as possible and sweating it out and, in my mind, checking out instead of checking in. And then there's other studios where it's all about the spiritual and the philosophical, and it's not grounding enough for me. So being able to try to marry those two in a way that doesn't alienate people or isn't offensive to people, that was the culture that worked for me.
Kristen, I hear so much authenticity in your journey, this clarity of who you are and alignment in your values being reflected in your work and in your trajectory of getting to this place where you now own and operate and teach and have your own yoga studio. And I'm curious about how you've developed that sense of self, that self-trust, and wondering if that's come through the work of embodiment. Has it come through practices like you mentioned, meditation? What does that look like for you to have that sense of authenticity and alignment in your work?
I definitely think that comes from my yoga practice. There's the Yoga Sutras, which is an ancient philosophy philosophical book. And two of the main concepts are ahimsa, which is do no harm or no harming, and satya, which is truthfulness. And so I think that those two concepts sort of, they weave in and out of our lives all the time, whether we know it or not. Sometimes, we don't want to, sometimes they don't work together, right? So I think that because have had a yoga practice my whole life, like as I said earlier, it's always been that anchor or grounding where you can block out all the external distractions and try to figure out what holds meaning for you. So a lot of times people get hung up in choreography, which is sort of, it's beautiful, but it's not, in my mind, it's not yoga. And so there's this idea, again, it goes back to the more ancient scripts of vinyasa krama, which means to place orderly in a step-by-step way. Right? So there's a reason that we're doing every pose that we're doing. And so like in the most basic sense, if we're working toward handstand, for example, all the poses you choose are going to have something to do with handstand. They're going to try to imprint the muscle memory that we need in order to come into handstand. And maybe that's all that somebody gets out of the practice, which is absolutely fine. But as you're slowly building up to that, you're also trying to sort of thin out or clear out all of the distractions that people might be dealing with in their everyday life by really trying to pinpoint or focus on, okay, where are my hands? Are my hands turned in or are they turned out? Or like in Warrior 2, is my knee over my ankle? Can I see my big toe? Okay, keeping that. Now, can I also make sure my back hip isn't hiked up? So it's this ability to try to do all of these things at the same time that helps to focus the mind. And so whether people realize it or not, and most of the time, people don't realize it. They're so focused on what's happening in the physical pose that they don't even realize that they've forgotten about whatever it was that was weighing on them. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's not me. That's just the yoga at work. So I that's why I love it.
I now know the secret behind yoga, I feel like. I'm such a rule-oriented person. I was like, I will follow all your instructions. And then I leave. I'm like, wow, I wasn't thinking about how I yelled at my kids this morning and this big project I'm behind on.
Exactly. It gives you that time to just be present.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love that.
Can you talk about how you think about this journey you've made and also this notion of personal sacrifice? I would love to hear also how your children are responding to your doing this. But I always find this kind of concept of work-life balance sort of like a mythical concept. But I'm curious your thoughts on sacrifice and trade-offs and this idea of a balance.
Yes. So when my children were little, it was easier for me to sort of, they don't have as much to do and you can plan their activities so that it suits your own schedule. Now I have 3 teenagers and they're very busy. And what I feel like I have sacrificed in terms of, being able to have the studio flourish the way I want it to and find the balance with my kids. I have teacher trainings every, twice a month, all weekend. So I've missed way too many activities. I've missed their games, their tournaments. And then, my oldest, she's in orchestra. I've missed so many of her concerts because they're always Wednesdays at 7, and that's one of my classes. And I think that people don't realize, like, oh, we'll just get a substitute for that class. But if you're gone, the people that come to your class will find something else to do. And it's very easy for that habit to just disappear. So what makes the studio thrive is the consistency of being there every single time I'm supposed to be there. And because of that, I have missed out on a lot of their activities that I wish I had been able to attend. Now that they're older, though, I think they do understand that even though I've missed, a specific game that they wanted me to be at, that I am there to pick them up after school every day. So there's those trade-offs where I can be with them at different times. Anyone wants to hang out from 11 to 2, I'm around. Just weekends and nights, forget it. So that is the biggest sacrifice. And also, I think anybody who owns their own business knows that you don't really have a day off. In the old studio I was at, if there's water coming through the ceiling because of the hair salon above, you have to attend to that. So there really isn't any official time off. But yeah, the perfect work-life balance, I don't think it fully exists.
Yeah.
It's just being okay with what you have to sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think as our children get older, they understand that and they appreciate that you have a life outside of them. I have 2 daughters and a son, and especially for my daughters, I want them to know that take care of yourself and have a career that you feel proud of.
Yeah, your story about being in a cubicle and feeling kind of suffocated by that experience and not also wanting your children to like think of work in that way. I actually remember in my own life, at one point my daughter said, "You don't enjoy your work at all," because I was miserable in this one job. And that really hit me because I didn't want that to be her vision of work, As you reflect back on all of this, do you think this was like a kind of calling for you?
Yes, I do. I mean, it probably sounds cheesy to many people, but I do think that it was a calling. I used to watch Oprah with my mom, and she always used to talk about the whisper, like listen to the whisper. And I think I ignored the whisper for a while because I thought I had to do something more prestigious. And when I finally just came to terms with the, in quotes, just a yoga teacher, I feel like a weight was lifted. And I do think that I would be lost without the studio, without yoga in my life. So yeah, I do think it was a calling. If there is anyone listening who is thinking of a less orthodox career path, I do think that if you follow the whisper and if there's something inside you that's telling you that you don't want to be doing what you're doing, then you might want to listen to that or examine it because, again, you have no idea where it might take you.
Yeah. And I think about the impact you've had from following that calling and what might not have been for many other people, for all the ways that you've created community and connection and embodiment for people. It's beautiful. Kristen, I'm thinking about how in many ways you've been ambitious in the best way of leaning into what's possible, of pushing yourself to just see, what kind of expansiveness can happen through home yoga and with that desire to support your family. How do you hold ambition and tension with enoughness of saying like, that's enough? What does that look like for you?
I don't know. I feel like the idea of enough that hasn't hit me yet. I feel like there are still things that I want to do with yoga and to grow the community. I don't think that searching for it is the way it's going to happen. I think that there's all these little seeds of ideas, and then when they're ready to sprout, they do. So for example, I wanted to always teach yoga, but I didn't just jump right into it. Or I wanted to open a studio, but I didn't open the studio until I had been teaching for a while. Same thing with the teacher trainings, and the retreats were always a fun idea, but there's that moment where you feel ready to take the plunge and make grow even more. And I do feel like there is more room to grow for home yoga, and not sure which direction I'll take it or where that will be, but there are little seeds that are waiting. I feel like I never, since the time of the cubicle, and even before that, there was just a sense of adventure in my life, I guess, that I don't ever want to say that that's enough, so it's over. I remember in my yearbook, my parents, or it was probably my mom, said, never let your free spirit, or I love something about your free spirit. And I just feel like when we do try to be our authentic self, then things just start to happen naturally without us forcing it.
Yeah, I love that metaphor of all these seedlings because we could nurture growth, right? But we can't like demand the growth or like force the bud. And yeah, and I think that's so beautiful of you doing that work to foster growth, to be curious about what might spring forth,
right?
But also releasing what it might be, or kind of holding it lightly at least.
Right.
So
yeah, just not having that fixed idea, because sometimes what you originally think is going to happen, it just goes in a completely different direction, and just being open-minded to the possibilities.
What struck me most about Kristen's journey was this gradual development of trust in her own inner voice. And she calls it the whisper, that intuitive sense that yoga was her path, even when conventional wisdom pushed her towards something more prestigious. Her place wasn't in that cubicle where she felt suffocated. It wasn't in the more conventional career she initially thought she should pursue. Her place was in creating the space where people could connect with themselves and one another through mindful practice.
And what's fascinating is how long it took her to fully embrace that. There's this societal pressure we all feel to justify our work in terms of prestige or financial success. But the soul of work often reveals itself in that space where our unique gifts meet a genuine need.
When she finally allowed herself to be just a yoga teacher, those are her words, that's when she found liberation and could finally step into her purpose. That authenticity becomes magnetic, drawing others who resonate with her approach.
Just so we're clear, when we talk about calling, we're looking at a life filled with meaning, being able to find ways in which your life makes sense and that you feel part of something bigger.
And that, I think, actually perfectly captures what Kristen has created through home yoga. Through physical practice, she actually helps people find mental clarity. Through community building, she connects them to something bigger than themselves. And through her teaching, she demonstrates how embodied presence can bring purpose to everyday life.
Yeah, what I find particularly moving is how integrated her work is with her values. There's no separation between who she is and what she does.
Exactly. The soul of work isn't found in some perfect work-life balance, but in integration. It's about living authentically and finding joy in your contribution.
And ultimately, isn't that what we're all seeking? Not just work that pays the bills, but work that makes sense of our unique gifts and connects us to something larger than ourselves. Kristen's journey from that cubicle to home yoga shows us that the soul of work is found when we finally have the courage to listen to our own whisper.
She's Dana Walsh.
And she's Michelle Weiss.
This has been another episode of A Life Worth Working. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends and loved ones who may also be searching for purpose and meaning in their work lives, or what we call the soul of work.